What's going on? This Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy. This is a tough one to do this week, guys. We do this waiver wire video every single week, and we kind of roll with the punches, and we're making additions. But hey, listen, I'm not unlike you guys. I have teams with Justin Jefferson. I have teams with Devon A-Chain. It becomes difficult this time of year when you get these sort of blows to your fantasy teams. But I will say that this is a week where there's multiple players that we can add that can provide short-term help. And there is multiple players that we can add that could potentially provide some long-term help, more of guys we can stash. But, when you are towards the top of the standings and you have a guy like Devon A-Chain that looks like a league winner, and then you have a knee injury that could put him on the IR, it's really tough to recover from that one. And Justin Jefferson, you most likely spent the 101 on him in your league. So that's incredibly difficult to overcome. It's almost more difficult to overcome than the Devon A-Chain loss, because A-Chain was a guy that you took in, the 10th round in a competitive league, or later in like the 12th round or 13th round of a league that, maybe was a little less difficult. Or you listen to Player Profiler and you were able to pick him up off of waivers, which a lot of you were able to do. So it's tough, but we're going to keep rolling with the punches. We're going to rally. Injuries are not excuses for our fantasy teams. I think that there are certain managers that are going to have a kind of a defeated mentality and sort of a quitting, a quiet quitting for some of them. They're still going to compete, but it's more of a, hey, my season's done. I had a buddy this morning text me, my season's done. I lost Justin Jefferson. I'm like, your season's not done. It's week 6. We have a lot of season left, and we're going to get ready for it. We got you covered here at Player Profiler. All the podcasts this week, I'm sure, are ready to help you out, and I'm going to help you out with this video today. So let's get started. We have a lot of players to talk about on the waiver wire. This is a very, very deep list of waivers. And we're going to start out by discussing the bye weeks. This is kind of a simple week for buys. Green Bay, Pittsburgh. That's it. So if you've been, using George Pickens, this week really affects you. But Green Bay, Christian Watson made a big play last night, but there hasn't been a whole lot of fantasy, consistency in that lineup. Aaron Jones, a guy you would start, but he's injured. It's kind of a good thing for Aaron Jones managers that week 6 bye. It's good timing for him to get healthy. A.J. Dillon fell in the end zone last night, but he's not a guy we're going to rely on. And Jalen Warren's outscoring Najee Harris. It's a bit of a mess right now. Najee Harris is certainly not a guy you want in your lineup, and Jalen Warren is sort of handcuffed by Najee's presence. And Pat Freiermuth injured, Deontay Johnson injured. So this is not really that impactful a week. But week 7 is going to be a tough one. You have Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the New York Jets, and Tennessee. You have 6 teams on bye week in week 7. We want to try to get ahead of the bye weeks as much as possible. At Player Profiler, we always try to tell you to be 2 weeks ahead. So this week, week 6, this is your most important waiver wire week of the season. You need to go through all of your teams. You need to make sure that you're covered for week 7. And if you need something like a defense or a kicker, or for that matter, a tight end in a lot of leagues, I want to be a week ahead. I think if you wait till week 7 to try to cover up, you're going to be dealing with more managers trying to add those one-off positions. You're going to have to spend more fab money on positions that you shouldn't have to waste fab money on. So let's try to be a week ahead. Again, Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, the New York Jets, and Tennessee, all on bye weeks in week 7. Let's talk about these players. Unless I say shallow league ad, then these guys are going to be available to you in 75% of Yahoo leagues or more. So we're not going to give you too many. I saw one person on Twitter today talking about picking up Jordan Addison. If Jordan Addison is available to you on waivers, get out of that league. It's wasted time, and it's probably time to ramp up the competition level. These leagues where guys like Jordan Addison are somehow not rostered, they're fake. I don't believe they exist. And I certainly don't think if you're watching a player profiler show or listening to a player profiler podcast, you have access to those sort of guys in your league. So let's talk about some realistic guys. My number one quarterback addition, he's rostered in a lot of leagues now, but he's still available in 66% of Yahoo leagues. That's Sam Howell. Washington lost to Chicago, but Howell had a really nice fantasy performance. He passed for a career high 388 passing yards, and he equaled the season high with 2 passing touchdowns. He is a high-end quarterback 2 right now. I think when the season ends, Sam Howell is going to be finishing somewhere between quarterback 11 and quarterback 16 in the final total points for quarterbacks. He makes mistakes. He doesn't recognize the blitz. But at the end of the day, we don't play real football. We play fantasy football. And Sam Howell should not be on your waiver wire. Scoop him up if he's still available. Baker Mayfield. This is a guy that I've been talking about. I talked about him in my sleepers video. I've been talking about him in my waiver wire recommendations. It's wild times, guys. I'm recommending Baker Mayfield, and not ironically. Baker Mayfield and the Bucs are 3-1. They're coming off of a bye week, and now they have back-to-back home games against Detroit and Atlanta. Detroit is a juggernaut right now, but this is definitely a winnable game for Tampa Bay this week, and Atlanta is definitely winnable as well. So you could be talking about a 5-1 Tampa Bay Bucs team, which would just be wild, especially after losing Tom Brady and having, this sort of like stink on them all offseason long. No one wanted to draft Buccaneers, but Baker Mayfield has been a big part of their success. Mayfield is coming off of a season high 3 passing touchdown down performance in week 4's victory over New Orleans. Mayfield looked good. And Mayfield's also getting rush attempts every single game. It hasn't really reflected itself in his fantasy scoring, but he's getting certain games where he's getting like 8 rush attempts, 6 rush attempts. That matters, and it keeps his floor a little bit higher. It's going to be one game where Baker Mayfield rips off like a 30-yard run, and people are going to say, whoa, look at Baker Mayfield scrambling. It's going to happen because he continually gets those opportunities. We're going to monitor what's going on with Mike Evans, but any way you cut it, if you're in big quarterback trouble right now, Baker Mayfield is there for you. One person I didn't put into the waiver wire article is Josh Dobbs, but depending on your league size, Josh Dobbs, he does some things. He's had multiple games where he's had 40+ rushing yards. He's not in the article, but again, check your league. You might be really hurting a quarterback. He's worth a look in deep leagues. Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is going to have some time, behind center in Indianapolis, and he's been good this season. Minshew had opportunities to play in now in weeks 2, 3, and this past week in week 5. That didn't look good for Anthony Richardson. I love Anthony Richardson. We have Anthony Richardson very high up in the dynasty rankings at Player Profiler. I have a good amount of Anthony, not a ton, but I have a good amount of Anthony Richardson on my dynasty teams. But I worry. I mean, he's taken a lot of knocks this year. He's a dynamic scrambler, but it really is troubling when you're seeing a young quarterback take this many injuries this early in his career, especially when his game is so predicated on rushing attempts. So I really hope that Anthony Richardson can fix that. But short-term, Gardner Minshew might have a month behind center in Indianapolis. Any way you cut it, he's got a revenge game this week against Jacksonville. It's a huge game. Jacksonville and Indianapolis are going to play for the number 1 spot right now in the AFC South. Certainly the Minshew magic could be a thing this week. He's got a lot of chemistry with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. You also have game 2 for Jonathan Taylor, and Zach Moss played fantastic last week again. So there's a lot to like about this Indianapolis offense. You also have the fact that Jacksonville has played 2 straight games in England. Now they're having to come home. It's going to be definitely a adjustment for those Jacksonville players, when you consider switching time zones, when you consider just the impact it takes on you to travel. So this is a really big one. I love the way Josh Downs looks when he plays with Gardner Minshew, but I think if you're in a super flex league, you want to try to get Gardner Minshew on your roster, see where this thing goes. He could be somewhere around, quarterback 18, quarterback 16 on the week. Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor, makes this list because Daniel Jones suffered a neck injury. Daniel Jones has had an issue with the neck earlier in his career. We don't know how long this is going to keep Daniel Jones out, but I think it's going to be some time. Taylor has had experience and a little bit of fantasy success throughout his career. He took over in the fourth quarter of New York's loss to the Miami Dolphins, and he passed for 86 yards. And what's most appealing about him is he had 3 rushing attempts in the quarter. We want to see the rushing attempts, and it kind of makes the bull case for Taylor. I think that you can bank on him having like 35 plus rushing yards every single game he starts, which is a nice, solid floor to start out with. There's a chance Tyrod Taylor could just look better. Daniel Jones, there's something off this year, and I wouldn't bet on it. Tyrod Taylor is a career backup, but I think this could be a improvement fantasy number wise with Taylor there. I'm interested in him in Superflex leagues. I'm going to prioritize him in a couple of my leagues, and he's available everywhere. He's again, Minshew and Taylor are going to be available to you in pretty much every single league. These are guys, rostered in 1% of Yahoo leagues max. Running back wise, let's remind everybody, Roschon Johnson, if he's available, it's a smash ad. And a lot of people are laughing, saying, not in my league, bro. But Roschon Johnson is available right now in 59% of Yahoo leagues. So certain leagues he's out there. He's a smash ad. Khalil Herbert is injured. Roschon Johnson is it. This is why you drafted him in the summer. This is why you took him in your rookie drafts. This is why we, talked about him so much at Player Profiler. This is not the way we thought this would play out. We thought that Roschon would potentially win the job over Khalil Herbert, and I still think that could have happened in the second half of the year, but this is his path. Herbert is injured. Roschon gets the opportunities. He is a big, strong back who can catch the ball. The Chicago Bears offense looks very good the last 2 weeks. Add Roschon if available. The number one waiver wire ad right now, though, is Jeff Wilson. And it's crazy to say that, but Devon Achane is going to miss what could be 4 weeks, and it's a knee injury. And we don't know how players are going to recover off of knee injuries. There can be setbacks. We need to assume the worst with our waiver wire additions, and Jeff Wilson being activated off the IR as the Devon Achane replacement. This is our number one ad this week. Don't overthink it. This is the best offense in football right now in Miami. Raheem Mostert has been very good. He's definitely going to see an increase in his production without Achane, but Mostert has struggled to stay on the field many seasons in his career. Jeff Wilson had 9 weeks of RB25 or better production in 2022. We want as many Miami Dolphins as possible. I've been saying that in my waiver wire column for weeks. And Wilson's been a guy that I've been writing about. I certainly didn't think he'd be a number one waiver wire ad, but the opportunity's knocking and Jeff Wilson is there. Add him wherever you can. Another shallow league ad, Justice Hill, available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. What's appealing about Hill is not that he had 7 carries and a touchdown. What's appealing about him is he had a season high in receptions with 4 catches. Baltimore is struggling to have consistent pass catching weapons. And I think that Justice Hill, this could become a new normal where he's seeing, 4 or 5 catch opportunities per game. And in terms of snaps, he outsnapped Gus Edwards. So Justice Hill is on the field the most of any Baltimore running back, and he's coming off a game with his season high in receptions. So I'm looking to add Justice Hill where I can. Again, he might be rostered in your league, but one guy who was dropped in a lot of Yahoo leagues, Kendre Miller, is available in 88% of Yahoo leagues, which is a little bit surprising to me for a day 2 pick with this sort of talent profile. But, again, I don't know league sizes. There's reasons people get cut, whatever. But Alvin Kamara, he's been a volume monster since he returned. He had 49 touches in 2 games played. But even with Kamara having a bell cow load, Kendre Miller had his most productive game as a pro. He had 16 touches, 90 combined yards. He's a high-end handcuff, and there's a potential that he could be a handcuff plus. Like, there's a chance that this becomes a thing where New Orleans leans on the running backs and Kendre sees like 12 touches a game, every game, no matter what, even with Kamara. So I think he's got an ascending role in the offense. We'll see. New Orleans has a big game this week in Houston. That's kind of screams like a neutral script. So whether or not New Orleans was just using Miller because they were blowing out the Patriots, or whether they want to use Miller and Kamara and just feed these running backs, that remains to be seen. But I think a lot of players are going to dismiss Kendre Miller just because of how bad New Orleans beat New England. And I don't think they should be so dismissive. He hasn't played that long in the league, but it seems to me like Kendre Miller, they want to find more touches for, despite Alvin Kamara being like a RB1 usage. Amari Marcado, this is a guy that I was able to add in like the secondary waivers in NFFC and FFPC for like $1 a few times because he was playing ahead of Keontae Ingram. DeMarcado had a little bit of work last week. And then this week, James Conner exits Arizona's loss with a knee injury. And DeMarcado, who's a 24-year-old, he was an undrafted free agent out of TCU. He played well. He had 10 carries for 45 yards and he had a touchdown. He had 3 targets the week before. He had 3 targets this week, and then he had a 4-target game against San Francisco the week before. So DeMarcado is sort of like a like-for-like replacement for James Conner. Don't expect for that kind of production. And again, like DeMarcado is the low-hanging fruit this week where a lot of people are going to spend maybe too much fab on him. I like DeMarcado, but I'm absolutely adding Jeff Wilson ahead of him. I'm absolutely adding Tyjae Spears ahead of him, who we're going to talk about in a moment. And then depending on what happens with Roschon Johnson, like 1 week of Deontay Foreman is going to be pretty appealing. And Foreman's the next person I want to talk about. Khalil Herbert's injury not only creates a path for Roschon Johnson, but it creates a path for Deontay Foreman. Foreman had 914 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns last year in Carolina, both career highs. He's 27 years old. He was playing in the third string role behind Johnson and Herbert because Deontay Foreman doesn't play special teams. So Travis Homer was active in some of these games and seeing more times because Homer's a special teams guy as well. So Foreman immediately has a chance to assume the number 2 role in Chicago behind Roschon, but there's a chance that he has the backfield all to himself this week if Roschon Johnson can't clear the concussion protocol. So Foreman could offer you short-term production, big-time short-term production, and then in terms of like the next few weeks, assume that he's going to be a 10-touch-a-game guy now that Herbert's out of the way. There's also a chance, and I don't think this is going to happen, but there's also a chance that Roschon Johnson, because he's a rookie, struggles. And if Roschon Johnson struggles, then Deontay Foreman could see even more of a path. But I definitely don't think that. I like Roschon Johnson. I think he's going to do quite well with his opportunity. But again, if I'm wrong, then Foreman definitely has a little bit more value than maybe he appears in our rankings. And then the player who I was going to have, and a shout out to my editor, Seth Dywald, and Jason Allwine, who does social media for us, and Joel Ybarra, who does editing for us. I turn in my waiver wire column on Monday evenings, usually before Monday Night Football, sometime like, late afternoon, early evening Monday. So I don't always get the information from when I record this video. Like I had Tyjae Spears as my number 1 ad in the article. It'll appear on social media as Jeff Wilson as the number 1 ad. And actually KJ Osborne moved up as well, which we'll talk about soon. But Tyjae Spears is still like the number 3 ad this week. He's available in 74% of Yahoo leagues. I talk about him every single video, every single Sleepers article. I think he's a baller. I think this is the next Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, Austin Eckler, Melvin Gordon. Like, we want more touches for the dynamic number 2 back who can catch the ball type scenario in fantasy football. Like, Derrick Henry's not done. Derrick Henry had a smash game 2 weeks ago. And Derrick Henry, like, anytime I talk negatively about him, he smashes. So Derrick, like, make no mistake about it, it's not like that with Derrick Henry where I think he's toast. But I do think Spears is just so good that he should get more touches. He had 69 combined yards on 11 touches, and Derrick Henry only had 16 touches. He had a season-high 5 targets, and he finished with 4 receptions for 45 yards. So, like, Tyjae Spears is dynamic. He can catch the football, and Tennessee needs playmakers. I like Spears a lot. Keaton Mitchell, we talk about him every week. Made my top 10 last week. I snuck him in this week. I even did like a top 11 so I can make sure he was in. 4.37 speed and two-way ability. Think Jaleel McLaughlin impact. This is not a guy who would be Devon A-Chain impact, but Jaleel McLaughlin, that sort of impact, I think Keaton Mitchell could have that on Baltimore if he gets the opportunity. If I need short-term production, I'm adding Justice Hill. If I need long-term, like lottery ticket, it's Keaton Mitchell because I think he could take over that backfield. Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell. I want to roster these guys. Jordan Mason, he's available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. Elijah Mitchell, available in only 67% of them. He's a shallow league ad. But Jordan, and I think that Mitchell's going to get cut in a bunch of leagues because Mason had 69 yards and a touchdown in San Francisco's win over Dallas. Mitchell's off with a knee injury. He could be back anytime. He's not on the IR, so this can't be something catastrophic. But I want to have one of these guys on my roster. I think that if it was next week that the 49ers needed to use one, it would definitely be Mason because Mitchell's banged up. And there's a chance Mason could just beat out Mitchell. But Mitchell played ahead of him in week 3. And Mitchell's had more fantasy success over the years with the same coaching staff. So you pick. But if one of these guys is available in your league, add them. Jordan Mason's going to be available in a ton of leagues this week. Add him as a high-end handcuff or add Mitchell if you want a long-term guy. Tank Bigsby. We want high-end handcuffs. Travis Etienne, career day. Bigsby, he would get a huge role if Etienne were to miss. He'd be in every week RB2. Pierre Strong. This is my speculative recommendation. He's available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. I added a bunch of Pierre Strong during the bye week for like $1 for $0. I think that this is like a Cleveland changing things up during their bye and having a little bit of self-scouting. Pierre Strong had a strong fourth quarter in the Browns' week 4 loss to Baltimore. Again, he played behind. He's not going to be. Jerome Ford is a thing. Jerome Ford is too good of a pass catcher to be relegated at this point. But in terms of running the football, this could be a more of a committee if Pierre Strong could, crack into more of a weekly role. So this is just kind of a bet on talent. This is a cleanup guy for you. When you're putting in waivers, you want to put in a guy for a few dollars or maybe a 1% lottery ticket, Pierre Strong. Ronnie Rivers, Zamir White, Rico Dowdle. Again, Ronnie Rivers, Zamir White, Rico Dowdle. They're available in either 94 or 95% of Yahoo leagues. All three of these guys are low volume handcuffs that would see a major increase in touches if the starter ahead of them were to go down. It's tricky to roster too many lottery tickets during bye weeks, but if you have a spot on your roster for just a random handcuff, grab one of these guys. And if you have Kyron Williams, you have Josh Jacobs, or you have Tony Pollard, then consider rostering your own handcuff. You see what happens with injuries with Devon A-Chain, certainly with Justin Jefferson, different with wide receivers, but we could talk about that when we get to them. But this time of year, if you like your team and your team's in good shape, make sure you're rostering your handcuff running back. A lot of people will say that that's a poor strategy. It limits the capability of your roster. You should roster other people's handcuffs. I think you should roster other people's handcuffs as well. But if I like my rosters, I want to make sure I have a handcuff running back. Think of just the cost if you were leaning on James Conner in your RB2 role and you had Amari Marcado for nothing. Now, if you lose James Conner and you didn't have him, you're going to have to spend 15% in an FFPC league or more on Mercado. So just think about it in terms of fab money. It's not playing it too safe. It's being safe with your fab. There's a big difference in that. Getting to the tight end position, Luke Musgrave is beefing with Matt LaFleur. He's seeing less snaps, but he's still available in 75% of Yahoo leagues. Let's put it like this. If I need short-term help this week at tight end, it is not Luke Musgrave. But if I have a very good roster or maybe a very good tight end situation and I want a tight end who in the second half of the year could make a big impact, Luke Musgrave's the one I want to roster. My favorite tight end ad this week, and the only one to make the top 10, was Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas had his best game of the season, and he actually left some points on the board. He had an opportunity to make a couple of extra catches, and he was targeted one more time in the end zone where he didn't connect, or was maybe right around the goal line was the target. But Logan Thomas could have potentially had a 2-touchdown game. Instead, he finishes with 9 catches on 11 targets, 77 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He was the preferred target of Sam Howell's all game long. He's got another strong matchup this week at Atlanta. Like, Logan Thomas is a high-end tight end too. And this sort of usage that we saw from him last night sort of reminded me of how Logan Thomas was in 2020 when he finished as a top 6 tight end. So Logan Thomas has been a guy they've looked to get involved pretty much every game, and he finally has a smash game. Go get Logan Thomas if you're in tight end, if you need tight end help. Tyler Conklin. Conklin has been very consistent this season. He's had at least 5 targets in 4 straight games, and he went over 50 receiving yards in 3 of those contests. New York beat Denver, and Conklin led the Jets with 67 receiving yards, which was a season high for him. One thing Conklin doesn't do, at least this season, is score any touchdowns. So, like, you need to understand what Conklin is. If I go into a week and I'm really jammed at tight end and I'm in a regular PPR league and I need 8 points, or if I'm in a tight end premium league and I need like 11 points for my tight end position, Conklin can give me that. But if I start thinking that Conklin's has all this ceiling, then you're going to get into trouble. So Tyler Conklin is an ad, but I have to put some context with that. Another tight end, Jonnu Smith. Even with Kyle Pitts having his best game of the season, Jonnu Smith continues to put up fantasy relevant numbers. He finished with 6 catches for the 2nd consecutive week, and he had 67 receiving yards. He's had at least 6 targets in 4 straight weeks. He's available in 84% of Yahoo leagues. We just saw Cole Kmet put up 15 PPR points against Washington. I think Smith and Pitts could both eat this week against the Commanders. You have Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett might have been cut during LA's bye week. And I wouldn't blame too many people for that. He hasn't really been doing anything this year. Gerald Everett was very useful to us last season, but this year has been a fantasy disappointment. This was a guy that I know some analysts were on as a tight end 2 target in the offseason. He had 6 targets in week 3, but he's done pretty much nothing else this season. He only had, I think, 2 catches last in week 4, and then LA was on a bye week this past week. But what's interesting about Everett is Donald Parham has a wrist injury. So if Gerald Everett can assume those Donald Parham routes and targets and red zone usage, then Gerald Everett starts becoming an interesting guy to add again. And then let's talk about Greg Dulcich. Dulcich is available in 88% of Yahoo leagues. He's set to return from the IR soon. Denver's searching for answers, and I think Dulcich will get immediate work. The Broncos offense can use help, and they don't use the tight ends at all, including Dulcich, who had 2 catches in game 1. Denver tight ends have only had 11 catches all season long. So, like, Greg Dulcich is going to step back in and be on the field because he's way more dynamic than what we've seen from, guys like Adam Troutman and the replacements in Denver. Noah Gray, this is one to monitor. If Travis Kelce does not practice on Tuesday, they play Thursday. So let me say that again. If Travis Kelce doesn't practice on Tuesday, then add Noah Gray. He's going to get the start on Thursday evening. Kansas City, like, Kelce gets hurt, leaves the field, comes back, finishes the game, but it's an ankle injury, and they might be cautious with this one and just sit Travis Kelce out again. Last time Kansas City was missing Kelce was game 1, and you saw actually the belldozer Blake Bell outproduce Noah Gray. But if I'm going to start a Kansas City tight end, to me, it's Noah Gray this week. You could probably have let's call him a top 15 tight end, and a bull case would be, inside of the top 12. Noah Gray has had some minimal fantasy production, but he's been on the field a lot. He's been a part of Kansas City's offense. If you look at the snaps every week, Noah Gray gets there. So if Kelce misses Noah Gray is a tight end streamer for you to consider. The wide receiver position is super deep this week. There's a ton of names to talk about. So get your pen and paper. And as a reminder, you can read about all of these guys in my weekly waiver wire article that drops every single Tuesday at PlayerProfiler. But it's funny, just like I talked about how Tyjae Spears was going to be my number one ad, and certainly he was my RB1, and then the Devon A. Chain injury news impacted that. KJ Osborne is now my wide receiver one. KJ Osborne had 5 weeks of wide receiver 15 or better production last year in 2022. And Minnesota is going to need him with Justin Jefferson headed to the IR. It's absolutely catastrophic for Jefferson. There's also a chance that Minnesota could be very, very cautious with Jefferson later in the year if their season is just falling apart. I don't know if Minnesota is going to get to that level, but Minnesota is 1-4 right now. So it's not a good scene. Justin Jefferson has been wide receiver 6 on the season. Obviously, you took him wide 1 overall in most leagues, but let's focus on KJ Osborne. Osborne is a strong addition. He's available in 91% of Yahoo leagues. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3 or better every week now that Jefferson's out. So basically, Jordan Addison will become the number 1 target on Minnesota. He, I think, becomes a mid wide receiver 2 level player every single week. Call him wide receiver 18, right around that level. TJ Hawkinson should also see a bump up in targets, but KJ Osborne is going to be well targeted and have a real role. Last year, if you recall, he was very strong filling in for Adam Thielen. Now he has to fill in for Justin Jefferson. He had 60 catches last year. We talked about the 5 weekly finishes of wide receiver 15 or better in PPR. This is more of a short-term plus type fill-in where you're going to get 4 weeks of KJ Osborne as a starter or a flex for you. He has some big playability. Again, he had 9 targets this week when Jefferson went down. So, like, they know Osborne. Kirk Cousins has had big games with him. He's going to slide right in. Obviously, it is a major downgrade to go from Jefferson to Osborne, but it could be worse for Minnesota. It's terrible for us, but I think that Osborne is a top 2 waiver wire ad this week, right behind Jeff Wilson. Josh Downs was a guy that I was very excited about, and I think Josh Downs also will be a strong addition this week. I've talked about Josh Downs in pretty much every article I can. He made my sleepers article last week. It made me look smart because he had 97 receiving yards in Indianapolis' win over Tennessee. Downs is available in 91% of Yahoo leagues. So again, Osborne and Downs are available in a ton of leagues right now. Josh Downs and Osborne are also going to be available in a ton of FFPC leagues. People cut players. People get tired of guys having poor performances. So, like, no matter where you play, these guys are going to be available in some of your leagues. And for most Yahoo players, they're going to be available in pretty much all of them. So Downs has had a 12-target game with Gardner Minshew, and he has now had a 97 receiving yard game with Gardner Minshew taking over. So, like, Josh Downs seems to be really clicking with Minshew. You're going to see a lot of Michael Pittman and a lot of Josh Downs. It's a very consolidated target tree with Minshew as well, which we love to see. Jonathan Taylor will be in his second game as a Colt. Obviously, Zach Moss played very well, but Josh Downs is a guy that I'm going to put in my lineups. I have some Josh Downs, and I'm going to go through all my leagues and make sure that if he's available in any of them, I'm at least price and force bidding for him because I think he's a really strong addition right now. Another very strong addition. This is a really fun week for wide receivers, guys. Another really strong addition is Curtis Samuel, available in 83% of Yahoo leagues. He was third in routes run to McLaurin and Dotson. Samuel only ran 40 routes. McLaurin had 58, Dotson had 56. But Samuel led all Washington wide receivers with 7 targets. Guys, Curtis Samuel's had 18 points for 2 straight weeks if you're going by PPR scoring. He's found the end zone in 2 straight weeks. He's actually neck and neck with Terry McLaurin in yardage and catches on the season, and he's outproduced Jahan Dotson in both. Curtis Samuel, you can plug in this week. He's a thing. He also gets the manufactured rushing attempts, not a lot of them, but he scored a touchdown 2 weeks ago on the ground. He's always a threat for those, and he's starting to see targets. He's had 13 catches over 2 weeks, found the end zone back-to-back weeks. A lot to like about Curtis Samuel, and available a bunch of places. 2 shallow league ads. Treylon Burks, who's available in 67% of Yahoo leagues. He should be back this week against Baltimore. He's going to step right in the wide receiver 2 role opposite DeAndre Hopkins. Burks was not very productive at the beginning of the year, but this is a guy that we believe in the talent, and Tennessee needs him. Tennessee is definitely a better team with Treylon Burks on the field. Another shallow league ad. I keep waiting for like the blow-up game, and it's just not happening. Rashee Rice is very good, but Rashee Rice is not getting enough snaps. Rashee Rice plays behind these guys like MVS and Justin Watson right now. And I still think he'll overtake them in the second half of the year in terms of like snaps, but on a per route basis, Rashee Rice is way more. I mean, he's more productive than those guys by any metric, but Rashee Rice found the end zone in week 5 against Minnesota. Right now, he's a guy that we want to stash rather than play, but I think it'll pay off in the rest of the year. Again, he's rostered in a ton of leagues, but he's available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. So Rashee Rice, definitely a guy you want to take a look at. To go a little bit further down the list, there's a big tier break after those wide receivers I listed. But Wandel Robinson, available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. Guys, it's bad. Giants are bad. It's a bad football team, a tough offense. But he's had 6 touches, and Wandel Robinson's had 6 touches in back-to-back games, and he's had 3 straight games with 5 targets or more. Tyrod Taylor takes over. There could be more manufactured touches for Robinson. Perhaps we see Robinson get more rushing attempts as well. I'm interested to see Taylor's impact on the offense. Darren Waller had 8 catches this past week. He's a locked-in fantasy starter. Obviously, when Saquon Barkley comes back, he'll be a locked-in fantasy starter. But after that, there's not too many Giants you want to even consider. Wandel Robinson could continue to see his role increase. Again, he had some very good games last year. He was a second-round draft pick for New York, and they really need the help. A 1-week fill-in, if you need a guy for 1 week, I like Robert Woods. Woods has had 6 targets or more in every game this year. He had 9 targets this past week in week 5. Didn't do anything in week 5 with them. He actually has 40 targets on the year, which is nuts. It's kind of like if you don't read the box scores, you don't kind of see how many targets Woods has been getting. But he's obviously been outscored by Nico Collins and Tank Dell in fantasy, and those guys certainly have more yardage. But in terms of targets, Robert Woods has 40 targets, which is, again, that's a wild amount of targets for Robert Woods. But this week, Houston hosts New Orleans. Tank Dell suffered a concussion, so he'll be in the protocol. So Robert Woods has a chance to see, another 9-10 target game this week. Trey Palmer, if you want to have an upside addition, Trey Palmer is still available in like 99% of Yahoo leagues. He scored 2 touchdowns this year. He is very fast, 4.33 40, and would see a big increased role if Mike Evans were to miss time with a hamstring injury. Evans will find out more this week, but Tampa Bay had their bye week last week, so we don't know how healed up Mike Evans is. But anytime you start hearing hamstring injury with an older wide receiver, you have to be proactive. And there's something to be said that if I roster Mike Evans, I want to prioritize Trey Palmer as sort of a handcuff to get me through till Mike Evans comes back. We know how good Evans has been this year. Palmer would not offer me that. You would see an increase for Chris Godwin if Mike Evans were to miss time, but that I'm definitely taking a look at Trey Palmer. Rondell Moore back on the radar, 50 plus rushing yard game again this past week. He's had 2 of them. He might see a little more running back usage with James Conner set to miss some time with a knee injury. Deep leaguers, Trenton Irwin, 5th-year wide receiver from Cincinnati. We all expected Tyler Boyd to take a step forward, and Boyd was fine. Boyd is Boyd. But Irwin actually outsnapped Tyler Boyd 62-60. And he had more catches, and he had more targets. Irwin had 10 targets, and he finished with 8 catches for 60 yards. Again, he outsnapped Tyler Boyd, and he ends up with a 10-target game with T. Higgins out. T. Higgins could be back soon, but if T. Higgins is set to miss another week and you're in a really deep league, take a look at Trenton Irwin. Another older wide receiver to take a look at is Nelson Agholor. Agholor, he had more targets than Odell Beckham or Rashad Bateman, and he had the second most wide receiver snaps on the Ravens as well, behind Zay Flowers. He's had 2 games over 60 receiving yards. Not great, but he's had 2 games over 60 receiving yards, and this recommendation is more of like an indictment on Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman. Neither one of these guys looks good right now. Nelson Agholor looks like the second best wide receiver on Baltimore as of now. Now, certainly Rashad Bateman can get healthier. Beckham's been a little banged up. Those 2 guys could get healthier as the year moves on, but we have to react to what we see right now. And Nelson Agholor, available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. He's a guy, like, especially if you're looking for like a very cheap addition, he's cheap and he's out there. And I think a little bit of self-scouting, especially when you lose to a rival like Baltimore did with Pittsburgh. When you lose to a rival, you have to self-scout and say, who are the guys that I need to be getting on the field? I think Nelson Agholor could be even more like targeted and snap-wise, even more compared to Beckham and Bateman as we move along in the season if those guys can't get right. And then the final wide receiver to talk about, just one to keep an eye on, is Cedric Wilson. Had 4 targets, and he caught all 4 of them, and he had 52 receiving yards. Braxton Berrios has been a guy that like people look at as like a sleeper, but Wilson outsnapped Berrios 29-20 this past game. So like, I don't know if they're going to start using Wilson more, or this was a 1-week kind of blip, but he's definitely a guy we want to monitor. Again, we're trying to chase Miami Dolphins, and this offense is going to look a little different without Devon Achane. So guys, keep your head up. Justin Jefferson, Devon Achane, both out, but we're going to grind these waivers. We're going to do whatever we can to get our team these W's, and keep an eye on this nasty, nasty set of bye weeks coming up in week 7. Get ahead of it. Stick with us here at Player Profiler all week long. We got you covered on videos. We got you covered on podcasts. We got you covered on articles. Check out all my written work at playerprofiler.com, and let's crush it this